Major funding for this program was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the Montana Committee for the Humanities and the Greater Montana Foundation. This is a story about wolves and the men and women who live in the last remnants of the Old West. It's the tale of an old battle and a new beginning, brought on by a bold wildlife experiment that restored the gray wolf to parts of its native range.
I see the black one here. Okay, there's 3 up ahead. See him in the opening up there?
Given the mythology of wolves, the stories of wolves, the culture of animosity that it goes back not hundreds but thousands of years, I would say that wolves are one of the most controversial wildlife species in the world. Well, collaring is the most important thing the Wolf Project does all year, because without collars, we can't do anything. We need marked wolves to count wolves, to study wolves. Through history, they've been a symbol of something else. And that's something that is interpreted differently by the person. To some, wolves symbolize waste and destruction and killing. To others, they symbolize wilderness and a healthy ecosystem. And wolves just want to be wolves. The pup was what, 24 something? Yeah. Okay, lower right is 27.1. Wolves had been eradicated from this area. And so a lot of people felt they were eradicated for a good reason. And they felt that the West was settled on the idea of eradicating predators, primarily wolves. The argument to bring him back is rooted in the Endangered Species Act, which means that that's law that states simply we don't have the right to, through our human actions, completely destroy, eradicate, eliminate another plant or animal species.
Like all Western stories, this one starts with the land. Yellowstone. 2.2 million acres of sprawling peaks and plains, where Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho bump up against each other along the spine of the Northern Rockies. It's the place where America recognized its own wild heart and chose to save it as the first national park. Remote, mysterious, dynamic, and teeming with life, Yellowstone is a reminder of the wild country that Lewis and Clark explored 2 centuries ago. Now that the top predator is back, the landscape has changed in ways that are still being measured. Lazy herds of elk are now taut and alert. Bears have new competition, but more carrion to eat. Coyotes are on the run, but birds and other scavengers all benefit from the return of the wolves.
Yellowstone Park is secure, core wolf habitat. So Yellowstone will always be a source of wolves for the surrounding states of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. And the reintroduction was designed to be boundaryless. We did not expect the wolves to pay attention to the boundary, and we told everybody that, and that's a point of contention, because many, many people have said to me, I have no problem with wolves in Yellowstone Park, but when they come out of it, I want them moved back in or killed, and we never said that. We were actually focusing on the entire Yellowstone ecosystem. It's just that Yellowstone Park was used as the release site.
When the wolves cross the invisible border, they are entering a world that has changed drastically since they last roamed the West. Many of the wolves that leave Yellowstone Park follow the fingers of wilderness that reach into southwest Montana. Almost 13 million acres of national forests surround Yellowstone. But the rich river valleys stretching out from the Yellowstone Plateau are prime habitat for both animals and people. And most of this land is private property. Paradise Valley, cut eons ago by the Yellowstone River, was once the domain of the Crow Nation, and later a handful of ranchers. Now it is cluttered with trophy homes and subdivisions that crowd both cattle and wildlife.
We need wolves outside of Yellowstone National Park because we need healthy ecosystems. And when wolves are present, we have a healthy ecosystem. They play an incredibly important role in balancing predator and prey numbers. And that's why they're called keystone species. The mountains above Paradise Valley are mostly national forest, which provides a lot of habitat for deer and elk. The deer and elk migrate down to the river valley bottoms, and naturally, wolves follow them. And that's where a lot of the conflicts between wolves and humans take place. Many more livestock are killed by lightning strikes and poisonous weeds than are killed by wolves, but the wolf kills that have happened are a pretty big strain on the ranchers here in the Paradise and Madison valleys. And as a result, more than 60 wolves have been killed, and this very much concerns conservationists.
I've been here for 50 years or more. They are bringing these wolves into our farm domesticated land. If they would keep them up in the hills or in the park, they could have giraffes up in the park for all I care. If they'd keep them in the park, there would be no problem. That's where they belong. That's where the tourists want to see them. They go to the park to see these wolves. They don't come out to my place to see a wolf. We could just leave the sheep on their own and figure that they would be safe. Most of them be alive in the morning. Now we've got to round them up, put them in our wolf-proof fence before we go any place. Got to do that before dark. In the morning, got to check everything over, see there's nothing around, and then let them out. 365 days out of the year.
We moved here in 1964. Dad and Mother had a ranch in Colorado, and he elected to sell out there, and we moved here, and we've been here ever since. I'm a fourth-generation rancher, so it's definitely in our blood for sure. There's some days when there's a couple of us here to feed, and then one drives and one throws the hay off. Other days when I'm alone, I just let the pickup go, and then I get out and feed the hay off. the changing of the seasons and working outdoors, and never the same old job day in, day out. It's always a change. Your job here on the ranch, I mean, it's irrigating and haying and then feeding and digging through snow maybe, and it's just something that you do, and you love it, that's for sure.
Get a day off from work, come out here and help Dad with this. Fun time. Well, it's a lot better than sitting at home.
What'd you ask?
3 up, go, 3 up, go.
Dad.
We had a real good calving year, weather-wise. We didn't have any real cold weather, and we had a good year.
Family ranching is a risky business, and the margins are slim. Martin and his family could sell out anytime they wanted. Their land is worth millions to developers. In fact, most of the ranchers in Paradise Valley have already sold off their land. But Davis is determined to hold on as long as he can. For him, it's not about the money. It's about a way of life.
We're branding calves, and along with vaccinating and spring work to the cow herd. Every calf will get 2 shots, and then he gets a brand. And we've got a couple of different ownership of the cattle here, so it'll be 3 or 4 different brands we got to put on the calves. But they're all marked with tag colors for the ownership, so. And it's all in the family, so if we make a mistake, it's not that big a deal. In about another month's time, they'll all be going to mountain pasture for the summertime. It's been from 1st of June till about mid-October up in the mountains.
Not all of Davis's cattle make it safely to summer pasture. In the early years of wolf reintroduction, wolves killed a calf and wounded a heifer on his land 50 miles north of Yellowstone Park. Other herds in the valley also suffered occasional wolf attacks. The losses were minor, but they stung.
Wolves and livestock don't mix. That's the reason they were eradicated back when.
One of the first groups of Yellowstone wolves to claim territory in the ranching community was a family that followed migrating elk about 20 miles into Paradise Valley. The pack was named after the place they chose to den, Sheep Mountain. As winter approached, elk moved to lower ground, and the wolves followed their prey.
Wolves got to chasing her, and they chewed up 2 heifers. That's where they bit her and ripped that hide loose. She's got some pretty deep puncture wounds back here. I have kind of a helpless feeling because we aren't allowed to protect our property. I mean, I think if they would have wanted wolves in Yellowstone, maybe they got too many elk up there. Maybe they needed wolves up there. But I don't think it was right putting them on the endangered species list because, I mean, our hands are tied down here and we can't protect our property. They chewed her up from the outside. It didn't leave any teeth marks on the hide. You couldn't see it until we skinned her.
And look at the bite wounds on this sucker. I mean, this sucker was bit, what, 50, 100 times? I don't know how you'd even count such a thing. And they're just gnawing on them the whole time. I mean, that's not cool.
I think for public relations' sake, the people that want the wolves, I think it would be advantageous to their cause to take these troublemakers out and just remove them.
That's just what the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did. In an effort to reduce tensions in the valley, government agents shot 2 of the Sheep Mountain wolves. The rest were tracked using Doug Smith's radio collars and darted with tranquilizers. Conflicts with livestock were increasing outside the park, and wolf biologists wanted to try something, anything, to prevent the depredations.
Okay, you got ages, estimates on these? I'll just get them as I go.
Yeah, I would get them as you go. Just look and see what I wrote down on the data form.
When the wolves woke up from their drug-induced slumber, they were in for quite a shock. They were now in a 1-acre pen on the Montana ranch of environmentalist and media mogul Ted Turner, who had teamed up with the government to help with wolf reintroduction. Their radio collars were replaced with color-coded shock collars.
The calf is wearing a little backpack. Actually, it was a dog backpack that we rigged up. It has a little britchin and a breast collar. Girth would work a little better for the... And inside those dog packs on either side is a Pelican box that we have a 12-volt battery that runs the roam-free field width. So let's say the wolf's head is here. He can come in about this distance before he starts getting shocked.
Just test it all around, make sure.
It's a roam-free collar made by Unitech. Same kind of a collar, containment fence collar that you would put on your dogs. And we're using little longer probes on the wolves because their hair is a lot thicker. If a wolf approaches the calf within 3 meters, they will be shocked within 0.3 meters. So that when they come that close to the calf, then they're pretty committed in the behavior that they're going to do, and they will be reprimanded or shocked for a behavior that comes in with 0.3 meters of that calf. We can answer, can we prevent a wolf from attacking a calf in the pen? And 2, we'll have to follow up with some pretty intensive monitoring after they're released. And the questions there would be, has this worked? Has it stuck? How long does it take them to unlearn this behavior? Will they teach other pack members to avoid cattle? What a good boy.
After several months of experimental conditioning, the Sheep Mountain wolves were released back into their Paradise Valley territory. If the pack stuck together and kept away from cattle, the shock treatment would be considered a success.
I wish they were elsewhere than right here where our cows are going to be. Of course, it's a while before our cows do get here, but it's a worry to me that we have so-called convicted wolves that were at least in on, or they were part of the pack that depredated on livestock. And that's a worry to me that they're back out there again, whether they're trained or not. You know, I really don't know that wild animals can be trained. No one does. And so it is a worry to me.
Hopefully they won't be back.
The Sheep Mountain wolves never reformed as a pack. They simply dispersed as lone wolves across the valley. 2 were killed for livestock violations, and 1 drowned. But another wolf pack, Chief Joseph, was traveling in and out of Paradise Valley from its territory in Yellowstone Park. This time, Asher enlisted the help of ranch managers and wranglers to try some non-lethal methods to convince the wolves to steer clear of human settlements and livestock.
Going as far as the Madison Valley, back to their den site, and over into this Tom Miner Basin. We've got 3 different type of munitions. They're all in a 12-gauge shell, and these are cracker shells. They're like an M80 explosive, and you have a really good range on these, and there's a delay.
So they just go out there and explode and...
Yep, it's a big flash and a loud noise. The next ones are bean bags, which are also in a 12-gauge shell, and this is what they look like. And there's 1 ounce of 9-shot in here.
I see.
And then we have rubber bullets. And because this is an experimental population, but they're still endangered, people are pretty limited as far as what they can and can't do.
Yeah.
So Fish and Wildlife Service came up with this, and what's been nice about this is people are feeling like they have a little more control on protecting, you know, private land or protecting, you know. Exactly. Oh, thank you. Nice. That was a rubber bullet. They've come up with this feeling like this would be a good way to haze them off. And you got to make it hurt, because it's one thing, I mean, you can shoot up in the air all day long, and if it doesn't hurt, there's no negative association. As long as they associate that sting with you, then I think it's a good thing. But to just go chase wolves or just go hit wolves, I don't think they'll make the association, and it's probably not as effective.
Drop the line.
A little bit, but I mean, it can't be more than. Yeah, this could be. And they're all, all the way down the hillside. I think they might have dug some out of it.
God, I hope nobody's in here. I mean, I can't even feel the back yet. See, this isn't very good because it's such lightweight stuff. If they do den here, they're in really close vicinity to cattle, and with that many mouths to feed, there's a good chance that they'll start turning to cattle, because cattle are more vulnerable. If we can get them to den at their old site in the park, the trend has been that they didn't come over into the Cinnabar Basin or the Tom Minor Basin, and they stayed out of trouble. And so that's our hopes here, is to wreck these dens, and hopefully she'll go back to an old familiar place, den there, and that might save them at least through this summer.
The plan worked. The Chief Joseph Pack abandoned its destroyed den and moved back to the safety of Yellowstone Park. By the summer of 2003, wolves leaving the park wouldn't have the luxury of returning. Every acre of Yellowstone had been claimed by a wolf pack. Each of them was willing to fight for its territory. And these days, wolves searching for home ground outside the park can run into obstacles more formidable than split-rail fences.
When I was a kid, it was just the ranches. There really wasn't any people that just had homes here. It was ranches, some small ones and some larger ones. And now there's subdivisions and people want a piece of this, and you can't blame them to have the piece of this to live in. And I remember my dad saying at one time in the evening he'd go out to irrigate or whatever, and he'd count 8-yard lights is all he could count. And now, of course, looking out across the valley, it's just like counting the stars. "50 miles and 3 wilderness mountain ranges west of Paradise, less than a day's walk for a wolf, lies another valley linked to Yellowstone Park. The Madison is known for its sprawling cattle ranches and migrating elk herds. And like Paradise Valley, a river runs through it. Urban refugees looking for a piece of the West have finally discovered the Madison Valley, and the building boom around the city of Bozeman, 50 miles north, has the Madison ranching community on edge.
On a clear day, we can see about 75 miles. And everybody that comes and looks at it, They're amazed at the view here. We enjoy coming up here in the mornings. We come up, check the cows in the mornings for breakfast.
Back in 1995, Lynn Owens wasn't worried about the newly reintroduced Yellowstone wolves. Encroaching development was on his mind.
Now there's this subdivision right over here where this a small stack is and the machinery. That was a hayfield, and 2 years ago that got sold, and they're subdividing that.
So Owens and a group of his neighbors did something unheard of in a small western town like Ennis. They formed a conservation organization, the Madison Valley Ranchlands Group. Although they knew they couldn't stop development, they hoped they could preserve some open space, along with the Madison Valley's rural character.
Ranchers decide, well, there are issues that we need to work with, so we'll take the lead on that. We find that the core issue that threatens ranching and wildlife and everything else is growth, more people coming in. And so we'd like to see the growth happen in a way that is minimized as far as the impact on those things that we value, that support ranching, that provide wildlife habitat. I get phone calls all the time, and a guy will say, how many horses can I put on my 20 acres if I come out there? And I say, none, because you have to have 50 acres for a horse, or 100 acres, depending where they are. And so the open space is a habitat thing. It's not a divided up and it works for everybody.
I walked into a situation where the traditional ranching community had come together in a group called the Madison Valley Ranchlands Group. And, you know, they didn't have marketing prowess or maybe business organizational skills, but they had their hearts and their land stewardship ethic in place. And that's what I walked into.
The Ranchlands Group embraced Lang, a Silicon Valley multimillionaire who had bought the 18,000-acre Sun Ranch from a Hollywood movie star.
You know, when I told my friends in California that I was going to give a little talk at a weed party in Montana, they said, you know, you're from San Francisco, what else are you bringing up there? I said, hey, one thing at a time.
There's a lot of change going on in the Intermountain West, and I figured the place that I love as much as I do, maybe I could have a hand in steering its development, steering its direction. So we look at Sun Ranch as one big experiment. I grew up with the notion in the Bay Area, sort of Sierra Club ideals, that cows were somehow bad. And then you get out here and you realize that no, in fact, they're a tool like any other on a landscape. And as we, as stewards, manage the land forward, cattle isn't just for beef. We've used it to increase elk habitat, to repair the riverine areas, the riparian zones, and we can also eat them. So that's a triple whammy in the positive direction.
As a conservation property, 95% of the Sun Ranch will be protected from development. Barbed wire fences are coming down, and miles of stronger fencing is dropped to the ground each winter to allow herds of free-ranging elk to graze as they move across the ranch. Many of the elk migrate each year from Yellowstone Park. With the elk come grizzly bears and wolves in search of new territory.
I understand that there's a role for the top predator in any ecosystem. 1,600 cows in the middle of Wolf Central. How do you live and ranch with wolves in your midst, with grizzly bears in your midst, with coyotes in your midst.
It takes an eclectic crew to run a conservation ranch, where wolves are welcome and cows are a source of income. There's Todd Graham, ranch manager and rangeland grass specialist.
This is Billy.
Jeremy Gingrich, head of operations. Vicki Backus, PhD candidate and predator deterrent specialist. Wrangler and budding environmental writer Bryce Andrews. And from Utah State University, James Stewart, the livestock grazing coordinator. With the grass greening up and cattle arriving for the summer of 2006, Lang's experiment was about to become extremely interesting. A group of wolves called the Wedge Pack had decided to den on the eastern edge of the ranch.
How do you run livestock in the middle of a pack of wolves? I had never even seen a wolf when I moved here from Wyoming. Last few days, we put 500 steers in this pasture. They're fresh off the trucks, going to be here all summer. The wolves are said to be right here in the mouth of Bad Luck Creek Canyon. There should be somewhere around 9 adults, and we speculate that they may be having pups up in there. And then we put 250 cow-calf pairs somewhere right close to them here.
We bring the cows to summer pasture in the spring like this. It's about the second week of June, and they'll stay here for until about mid-October, and then we'll take them back down to the lower country down on our hay meadows for the winter. But every year, about this time of year is when the cattle go to the summer ranges, which a lot of them are in the mountainous areas like this. There's some wolves in the area now, and it's been posing a problem. We haven't come out of here with our full count some years, and then we've had our weaning rate has been down because of the wolves herding the cows more or less. And matter of fact, one year the calves came out 100 pounds light across the board, and that was devastating to us. There was a little higher cattle market, but it didn't do us any good because we lost so much weight in the calves.
It's no longer a question of if the wolves will show up. It's a matter of when and how many. But this year, a change in the political climate has arrived, along with the warmer weather. For the first time since wolves returned to Paradise Valley, the ranchers feel they have an active hand in their management.
Well, they killed one right out here, about 400 or 500 yards away, in the fall one year.
As a rancher and politician, Bruce Malcolm served on the Montana governor's task force, assigned to help draft a wolf management plan for the state, one that would lead to delisting the Yellowstone wolves from the Federal Endangered Species Act.
We had a predator that we did not want. We did everything we could to stop them from introducing the predators. We said if they want to have it in Yellowstone Park, that's fine, but we don't want it in Montana. But the powers to be and so forth, you know the story today. They're here. So now we're going to try and live with them. And we've tried to adapt and tried to make management plans to survive.
Since the wolves were reintroduced in 1995, we have had conflicts with wolves every year of some sort.
In meetings across the state, ranchers, politicians, and environmentalists often butted heads. But they came up with a workable consensus. While neighboring Idaho and Wyoming are still arguing over plans that would drastically restrict the number of wolves, Montana has worked out a strategy to live with them and eventually treat them like other wildlife species. The Montana plan, following federal guidelines, will require at least 10 breeding pairs and 100 wolves to live outside Yellowstone on public lands or wherever they are tolerated. The new rules will allow ranchers to shoot wolves to protect livestock, but will not limit the number of wolves that can live in Montana.
Well, I think it's good for the wolves because they're going to learn that chasing cows is not a real good thing to be doing. And I don't think you need to worry about shooting whole wolf packs. You know, if you shoot one or two out of the wolf, there's not many marksmen in this country that can take out 6 or 8 wolves in one shot.
And get into the...
I think the environmental community is realizing that we have a lot of values in common with ranchers, that they're not our enemy, that we can help them if we work with them, and we can reach common goals, like protecting both livestock and wolves.
This one has it in 2 different ones, but don't worry about that. So, and what you do is to find a wolf, and what you'll have.
The Range Riders program is an effort to reduce conflicts between wolves and livestock outside of Yellowstone National Park. And in collaboration with local ranchers, we hire riders that ride for 6 months out of the year on public and private property to protect livestock.
No, louder.
Well, we start at about 5 every morning. I mean, that's the time we get up, get the coffee going, and get the fires going. Here pretty quick, I'll go up and call the horses in. I just hope our presence here is gonna do a lot of good. I really do.
Range Riders Jim and Marilyn Powers will spend the summer and fall in the mountains near Medicine Valley, watching over cattle. Most wolves avoid people, and just riding with the herds can discourage attacks.
Come on! Come on! She's a really good, really honest horse. Easy now. You're just taking your picture. Huh?
Mine's right there. My long-legged son-in-law.
Well, we'll see you in a few minutes.
Back on the Sun Ranch, Vicki Backus is a motorized range rider, sleeping among the cows to help keep the wolves at bay.
What I try to do by being out here and driving around is just creating a human presence and making as much noise as possible. Every evening I go out between 7:30 or 8:30, and I circle all the herds on the four-wheeler, except the one that I decided that I'm going to camp next to. So this is Flandry. It was a technique that came over from Eastern Europe. They don't know exactly why it works, but wolves avoid it. And when it's windy, you know, these flap in the wind. And so someone got the idea that if wolves avoid it, maybe that could be used as a deterrence technique. for livestock. So it's been tested both in captivity and in natural settings, and it seems to work. Hey, have a nice night.
Back before wolves, we call them the BW years before wolves, we checked on the cows maybe once a week. We get busy with haying or whatnot, maybe even it'd be a little longer, maybe up to about 2 weeks between checks on the cattle. And now we feel like we have to check on them at least every other day. And that's just to make sure nothing has been killed or that the wolves are bothering them and pushing them through the fences or whatever. And it's a fairly long trip. It takes about a half a day just to go up to do this, to check on the cattle and come back down, because it's all mountainous terrain, and so it's not an easy job to do.
If they've been bothered by the wolves, they're different around our dogs for sure. They're kind of wild-eyed and everything like that as soon as the dogs show up, and they didn't appear to be today, so everything's probably fine.
I've started noticing that the last year or so that the environmental folks are saying, you know, I like wolves, but I also like ranchers, because where there's ranchers, there's this wide open space. So how can we have both? How can we have the rancher and the wolves together? And that's the part that we need to get figured out, all right. That's the tough one.
When the killings occurred, we were upset. We were really angry. We'd lost a few heifers in the middle of all of our efforts. The wolves came in, took the cattle out, and we were very upset.
So we applied for a shoot on site, SOS permit, and were granted that. And we took it out there, but it was our choice to determine which of the wolves to kill.
Between Middle and North Squaw, or where do you mean exactly?
No, they're going to go through that state section, go on the same road that Dave's going to take, but just go past there and just keep going until the road ends.
They could take a car on this road over here. My thought is if we had maybe somebody here, then there's this timber in the middle of the state section, maybe someone there, and then maybe somebody just up here by this water trough.
I came to this ranch because the way we do things, we try to coexist with predator species and try and make a large tract of open land for wild animals, and to end up in a conflict like this and have to be running around after an animal that I think is a really impressive animal with a gun is just a really difficult thing. I think a lot of places probably would be calling for the extermination of the whole pack, and I think we're very interested in the notion that there may be some sort of middle ground where we can occupy this land and have minimal levels of loss, and the wolves can also remain a presence here. And that's what I'd really like to see. That would be the ideal.
Sun Ranch personnel shot 2 members of the Wedge Pack. and the attacks on cattle stopped for the rest of the summer. In early fall, the wolves attacked again, killing 2 more heifers. 3 more members of the Wedgeback were shot, this time by federal agents.
We would like to try and coexist with them. They are a species that was put on this earth like any other. So, but it is a bit of a war. We have to let them know more than just a shot across the bow. Our hazing efforts were met with success for 7 years. And then all of a sudden this year, as Todd said, they changed their tactics and came in and said, you know what, that hazing stuff they do doesn't seem to work. So we had to up the ante. We'd like to be able to work with this pack because if they learn our ways and we learn their ways, we can coexist. And that's what this is all about. If you work with one pack, whether we kill a few and the rest remain aside, that pack will eventually claim this territory as their own. So that if new packs come in, they will defend their territory against potential new predators on our cattle. So in the twist of fate, if we can figure out the détente with one pack over time, they actually end up being more of a defense mechanism to incoming packs than we might.
I came up on top and looked down this morning. That group was going somewhere. They're pretty unsettled. They're probably the most active group of the herd this morning. So what I was trying to do is just walk through them. When they gave to my pressure, which was me, I would release. You'd watch me step back a little bit, just letting them know that everything's all right, that they can go on eating and not be so stressed. The idea is just to keep them gaining weight and just get used to us, get used to the dog. I took my quieter dog with me just so they can get used to them. Quiet cattle are healthy cattle.
When the aspens and cottonwoods start to turn, it's time to round up the cattle. Most will be shipped to markets in the Midwest. But just how well cows can mix with wolves is about to be measured. Each calf or heifer is expected to gain at least 500 pounds over the summer. But the disturbing presence of wolves might have kept the cows from grazing.
If we figure the difference of the gain, we're about 80 to 100 pounds light on all these heifers. We've had just short of 900 heifers here. So if we have 900 heifers, or say 880 heifers, is 880,000 pounds, or 88,000 pounds times 105. That's about we're short about $92,400 in gain on these cattle.
To see them go. Wish they were weighing a little bit more. The guy who owns them is really upset and losing a lot of money today. It's not a very good day, but it's good to get them the hell out of here. Now we can rest a little bit.
I swear, Dad, that calf we roped is by far the biggest one in this bunch. Yeah.
Pounds of beef. That's our bottom line, is pounds of beef. And when you don't have as many pounds to sell, there's the problem.
For large cattle operations, it's a blow when the cows come back light. But for the Davises, it could mean disaster.
We've got our count, so we're pretty happy with that. Appears like everything came home, so it's a good year, I guess. We don't know until they run across the scales for sure about the weight, but as of right now, they look pretty good, I think. The cows are home, or they're on their way. It's good to have them home, yeah. It's nice to get rid of them in the spring and have them go to the mountains, but it's a good feeling to see them come home in the fall.
Autumn quickly gives way to winter in Yellowstone country. It's time for the ranchers to take stock of their gains and their losses, and to make plans for the future.
What the place is worth, who knows? I mean, maybe beyond our wildest dreams, and we could possibly trade this for a place maybe without this beauty. We'll stay out in the plains somewhere, and probably could trade this ranch for one 3 times as big and still be ranchers, but not be here where the vacationers like to stay.
It's one of the prettiest places I've ever lived. And this table, there's been a lot of people around this table in whatever, 44 years, whatever it is.
Probably drank enough coffee to float a battleship right at this table, probably.
And the old table stood up pretty good. Better than I have.
It's kind of hard. You have new ideas with old ideas. You know, my ideas are a little different than my dad, and it might take a little jumping around to get them to come together, but I hope one day we can maybe get it to work out a little, and so I can be sitting here making the decisions while he sits in here and watches me. Well, I can't just be like, all right, I'm going to take over today, and the wolves are not going to be here. I mean, it's just like saying, well, I wish the gophers and everything else were gone too. It's just one of those things you have to accept when you go into it and know that you might have some losses and everything, but you just got to live with it.
I guess we're still recovering from that one year that we lost all that weight. And we never know from day to day whether it's going to happen again. I mean, we've had wolves howling up here in the hill behind the house just the last few nights here, and we never know which morning we're going to wake up and have more of our cattle killed out here. We don't know. We hope it sure won't happen, but it sure could any morning.
And this year we're bringing back the same cattle owner that suffered the losses from last year. He's the one who's questioning, do these guys have what it takes to make sure that my cattle are in a safe way this year? We may have to increase the range rider program. We may have to increase the number of aggressive heading them off at the pass incidences in order to achieve the detente that we had achieved by the end of last summer. You know, they spent the entire winter chasing the elk herd up and over the pass and came back when the elk herd came back, when the snows got too heavy. So it's just another round, sort of like a boxing match, going from round 10 to round 11.
It's been said that the best wolf habitat resides in the human heart. You have to leave a little space for them to live. But how much space are we willing to share? The return of the Yellowstone wolves is more than an experiment. It's a test. Wolves test the patience and endurance of the ranchers who live among them, who in a twist of fate may now hold the key to their survival. And wolves test our tolerance of things we can't control, that wild nature we chose to preserve in the first national park, and the last remnants of the old frontier we still call paradise. For more information on Wolves in Paradise and other PBS programs, go to pbs.org. Major funding for this program was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Additional funding was provided by the Montana Committee for the Humanities and the Greater Montana Foundation.
We are PBS.
It's the biggest night in comedy when Tina Fey brings home the Mark Twain Prize. Join Steve Martin, Betty White, Steve Carell, Jimmy Fallon, Tracy Morgan, and many more for Tina Fey, the Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize.
Coming up next.